And that is the reason why majority of the candidates cannot crack these interviews. Hello everybody, welcome to today's video. Before we jump into discussing the interview process at McKinsey, let me share a bit about myself. So I was a management consultant at McKinsey for 8+ years, and I did interview candidates in different universities and also as part of off-campus recruitment drives. Now, this entire video is based on my experiences of going through the interview process at McKinsey for multiple times. Please do understand this is my own perspective and things might be a little different across different offices. So you might come and say, hey Pawan, it did not work out like this for me. There are always exceptions, but understanding this process will definitely help you to probably come up with that next best answer. So let's get started with the video. Now, in the entire interview process, you need to understand one thing. If you get an interview call, it means that McKinsey believes you are a great candidate and you can be a good consultant. And that is the only reason why McKinsey is going and giving you that interview invite. Otherwise, they wouldn't waste your time and they wouldn't waste their time as well. Imagine the first round of interviews that you will be taken. There are 2 associates or 1 associate engagement manager who are spending roughly an hour each, and their time value of money is roughly $400-500 per hour. So they are spending up to $1,000 on you in the first round itself, which means they are pretty confident that if you clear these interviews, you are going to be a great asset to the company. So it is on you now to clear these interviews, take the support and move to the next stage. So with that premise set, let's jump into what happens in the interviews. The first step is every single interview round, whether you are applying in the off-campus position or directly from the campus, every round has 2 interviews. That is 2 one-on-one interviews or 1 to 2 interviews. The reason is simple. Even if you do not perform well in one interview, there is always a chance for you to perform well in another interview. It's a different thought process when you think about majority of the other interviews, right? Hey, you always come back and think, hey, I did not do this question well, so I might not get another chance. I screwed this interview, done. But McKinsey interviews are run little differently. If you are performing exceptionally, at least in one of these interviews, right? You don't need to do well in both these interviews. It's good if you do well, but even if you are having a bad day and if you do not do well in one of these interviews, it's fine. The place where you did well, that interviewer and the other interviewer, both of them will come together at the end of the day and have a discussion around, hey, how did this candidate do? If at least one of them says this candidate was exceptional, I'm not saying average, I'm saying exceptional, then they discuss, they debate why they should push the candidate into the second round. This is not a process of elimination. They already believe that you are a good guy. So they want to give you a second chance and they want to push you into the next round. Please understand the entire interview structure is set up this way. Also, before we go into what happens more in an interview, let's take a step back, and before you get an interview invite or the date for the interview, you are also assigned somebody called as an interview buddy. Now, this interview buddy's role is to help you understand how these interviews are conducted, what should you do, how you should prepare, what are some of the materials, and if you have any questions, you can ask them. Well, of course, every interaction should be treated as, let's say, an evaluation, but still, there is this support system which is trying to help you overcome these interviews. And that's the beauty of it. Whether it's the buddy system or whether it is having 2 interviews in every single round, the whole objective is to make you shine. Now, moving on, we understand that, hey, every round has 2 interviews, right? So if you move from the first round to the second round, again, you have 2 interviews. And if you move from the second round to the third round, you have another 2 interviews. Sometimes there are only 2 rounds, sometimes there are 3 rounds, doesn't really matter. But in every round, there are 2 interviews. Now, the question is, what happens in these interviews? Well, every interview typically is structured between 40 to 50 minutes. And the first 5 minutes, as I mentioned, is dedicated so that you are a little more relaxed, you are eased in, and there is a possibility for you to bring your A game into the picture. And subsequently, after that 5 minutes of relaxation or just connecting with the interviewer, then typically there are 2 components within each interview. Number 1, case interview, which happens for 25-30 minutes. And number 2 is your personal experiences interview. Case interviews, the format is pretty standard. Everybody knows about it. right? However, I want to talk about what is it one thing that you need to remember and a few things why people don't do well in these case interviews. Subsequently, I'll also talk about the personal experience interviews and what can you do well and why people don't do well in these interviews. So let's get started with the case interview now. Case interview, you are given a business situation and the situation can have multiple outcomes. Let me tell you that again, there could be multiple outcomes. So there is never a rush towards a perfect answer. In my case, when I was interviewing, when I was the candidate, the interviewer asked me, hey Pawan, this is the specific analysis that we need to do to understand the impact of advertising on laptop sales. And I said that, hey, these are the factors that I will consider. And then the interviewer asked, okay, do you want to consider any more factors? Then I gave up 3 more factors as response. Then the interviewer further asked, can you think about any additional factors? So this conversation continued for almost 3 to 4 times. This question and answer, question, answer, question, answer. And after the 4th time, I gave up. But what I said was, hey, if I'm sitting in the team room at McKinsey, I have a lot of experts around like you, so I would rather take your help to see if I miss out any factors and I will continue with that answer ahead. She was pretty happy because this is not a race towards perfect answer. This is a race towards, hey, how well can you demonstrate or how well can you perform in a challenging situation? That's all. That is what they are testing. And that's one of the primary ways in which they are evaluating candidates. There is never ever a perfect answer in case situation. You need to understand that. However, sometimes the biggest mistake, let me come to the biggest mistake. The first biggest mistake that candidates do is when you are asked, hey, can you think about the factors that influence this market growth? Everybody starts off rattling the same obvious choices, same obvious factors. Now the interviewer would have heard those factors 1,000 times. Absolutely no reason why the interviewer should categorize you as an exceptional candidate and give you more chances. What you need to do, and this is where majority of the candidates go wrong, is they do not contextualize or they do not even listen to the question properly and contextualize the response to that specific question. And what does contextualization mean? It means simply you are answering specific to that industry. You are talking about the factors specific to that industry. You are bringing the examples live from the industry or some things that you have noticed in the past. This is not about the factors that you have learned in a casebook. This is much more beyond that. So listen carefully and contextualize your answer according to what the interviewer is asking. And how can you contextualize? Number 1, of course, you have to structure your answer. And number 2, you need to have some insights into what's happening in the business world right now. If you do not have that information, that insight into what's happening in the business world, it's extremely tough for you to become that exceptional candidate. Let me repeat that. To become that exceptional candidate, it's not just your structure, but it is also about your business acumen. And I believe this playlist that I'm creating on a daily basis would help you pick up that business acumen. I'm a consultant. I create these videos from a consultant's perspective, and I believe the most beneficial folks would be the aspirants, the consulting aspirants. So please do subscribe and check out these videos on a daily basis, because business acumen is something which you can't pick up the day before the interview. Probably 15 days before the interview, you can pick up the structures, but you just can't pick up this business acumen. Now, moving on, what happens in the personal experience interview? Personal experience interview is a place where you are asked to demonstrate or identify experiences in your professional, personal life until that point where you made a difference, where you had to go through some struggles and come up with, let's say, better solutions or better team environments or whatever it could be, that you faced some challenges and you overcome these challenges. And the issue is, majority of them come up with boring stories. And how do you say whether a story is boring versus not? Because they don't know the details. That looks very repeated. And this is a personal experience interview. Folks will come up with, hey, I did this analysis. My manager who did not like me until that point, like me after this analysis. Well, that's not a personal story. That's a technical story, right? So what I would recommend is, one way which worked for me is essentially go talk to your current managers and ask them, hey manager, are there any instances where I did exceptionally well in the last 1 to 2 years? Go back to your previous managers, go back to your colleagues. Ignore the noise around the technical stuff, but at least understand if there is a possibility of them telling you a few stories. And collect 3 to 4 such stories. Of course, you have your own ideas of which stories will work versus not, but combine these stories together. And that list of stories will be your arsenal before you get into these interviews. Now, the common mistake, again, a lot of candidates do is they don't talk about what they did. They talk about how the team was performing, what is the problem with the client, what are the problem with other team members. But this interview is about you, my friend. You have to talk about what did you do. Please never ignore that fact. Please go ahead, do those interviews, and subsequently you will realize that it's okay to talk about yourself as well. I hope that makes sense. This is again a common mistake that folks make. So just to take a step back and summarize, let me just help you remember the first point. These interviews are structured in such a way that you perform very well in the interviews. It is not about elimination, it is about selection. 2 main components: personal experience interviews and case interviews. Within the personal experience interviews, please do make the stories about yourself only. The interviews are about you, so you need to talk a lot about what you did. A good way to get to that is go ask your manager what was the great things that you have done in the recent past. Now, about case interviews, there are no perfect answers in any case. It probably will take an entire McKinsey team to figure out a perfect case solution. Now, that's not happening, so it is about how you approach that entire case situation. The common issues, the most obvious answers come out first, and people do not go beyond that. And to go beyond that, you need to make sure that you have the business acumen or the understanding of the general businesses so that your answers are beyond the obvious and much more contextualized towards that industry. Hope this video makes sense. Please do press that like button, and please do let me know if there are any other points you want me to cover with respect to McKinsey interviews, and I will be happy to do so. Thank you so much, guys. We'll look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.